known. Where has it been for the last few hundred years? So it's simply a way of telling the story of the Passion of Jesus, adding in all sorts of edifying details.
Even though the book was not included in the Christian canon, it exerted a profound influence on Christianity. Perhaps part of the reason was its telling of Jesus' final journey to the cross.
The fact that Luke does not mention Jesus meeting his mother on the way towards the cross really probably disturbed some of these early communities, and they wanted Mary to be there. So a creative genius within the community, if you consider these writings to be done by a genius, put her in there. And then, of course, this eventually develops into the Stations of the Cross much later. And that would be an important one on the way to the cross because of the mention of the holy women.
We know that in the 5th century in Jerusalem, pilgrims stopped at the place where they believed Pilate's trial of Jesus had occurred. And there's some thought that that may in fact be connected to this book, to the Gospel of Nicodemus.
But why was the Gospel of Nicodemus not included in the Holy Bible?
Well, the Gospel of Nicodemus didn't make the cut into the canon for a couple of different reasons. First of all, the second half probably wasn't written prior to the creation of the canon, the descent into hell part. The first half, the story of the trial of Jesus, also doesn't seem to have been discussed that much in the 3rd and 4th century by the sorts of people who were putting together canons. Probably because they saw it as very new, very recent, and therefore not even worthy of serious discussion for inclusion in the canon.
This is another case of a book being written too late, in a sense. You know that this story can't possibly be true. It's a corroboration of all of these other stories that are on the ground at the time. This can't possibly be a story that's written by an eyewitness. So in a sense, this is not a valid resource.
It is also possible that a story of Jesus in the underworld was too speculative or too disturbing for early Christian leaders. But why was this story so important to many early Christians?
This is an important story partially because you have certain parts of the Christian community saying there is no hell. Hell doesn't exist. Hell is like the state that you live in.
Perhaps the Gospel of Nicodemus was popular in early Christianity because it suggested that heaven and hell exist here and now on earth.
It is a holy tradition of the church to say that Jesus descended into the pit of despair, into the pit of darkness. Because what is hell? Hell is distance from God. Hell is being outside of the light and the love of God.
Next, an apocalyptic writing that almost became the final chapter in the New Testament. We now return to Banned from the Bible.
When the day of God comes, all the children of men from the east unto the west shall be gathered before my Father, whoever lives. And he will command hell to open its bars of steel, and to give up all that is in it.
The Apocalypse of Peter was one of many apocalyptic writings popular with early Christians. It was almost included in the Bible, but the Revelation of John was chosen instead. Why was Peter's Apocalypse such a hot contender? And why was John's Apocalypse, the book of Revelation, chosen instead?
More people felt that John may have actually been written by an early disciple or apostle of Jesus. By the 4th century, most people were convinced that the Apocalypse of Peter was not actually the product of Peter's hand. That, and I would also suggest that the Revelation of John is a more finely wrought book. It's simply a better piece of literature. And the Apocalypse of Peter is more of a cobbling together of other people's visions, and it's less original, less finely wrought, and in some sense less beautiful.
In the first 3 centuries after the execution of Jesus, the Romans were torturing and executing not only Christians and Jews, but all those they believed to be enemies of their empire. It was during these days that tales of the end times, called apocalyptic writings, began to appear.
The word apocalypse is a Greek word that means unveiling or revelation. And an apocalypse is actually an unveiling of heavenly secrets in its theological definition. It's God opening heaven to reveal something.
Apocalyptic writings were suppressed by the authorities because symbolically they presented dangerous ideas, like the defeat of imperial tyrannies such as the Roman Empire.
And the revelation usually is about how soon is the end of the evil age that is all around us, this age of injustice and impurity and violence. It's not about the end of the world as we use the expression, it's about the end of evil. How long, O Lord, will it go on? God will overcome someday, but how soon?
We often see people writing apocalypses around times of great persecution. This is true of John's revelation in the Bible, as is true for the apocalypse of Peter.
In the 2nd century, many Christians believed the apocalypse of Peter was spiritually inspired. Perhaps this was the reason it was seriously considered for inclusion in the New Testament.
When Eusebius talks about the books that are accepted, disputed, and rejected, in the disputed columns, in other words, the ones that could go in or out, he puts the Apocalypse of Peter and admits it was very, very popular. In fact, he has more doubts about the Apocalypse of John, which is the one in our New Testament we call the Book of Revelation. He's very unsure about that. But the Apocalypse of Peter is really one he seriously considers.
Peter's Apocalypse graphically describes the classes of sinners and their sins, their punishment, and the salvation of the righteous.
It gives a revelation of what hell looks like in gruesome detail. It's like looking at one of those medieval paintings. If you're a blasphemer, you're hung up by your tongue. If you're a fornicator, you are hung up by the appropriate male appendage.
We have people hanging by their hair, fornicators, people who are sexually attractive. We have people, usurers, being punished in their particular way. I believe they're up to their knees in filth. And